They said the land was worthless 500 forgotten acres in rural Wyoming, a collapsing cabin, unpaid taxes, and nothing worth saving. Caleb Turner had no reason to believe otherwise. He had just lost the only home he knew, and all he had left was a worn duffel bag and Atlas, the German shepherd who had never abandoned him. Then a letter arrived from a man Caleb had believed dead for more than 30 years. By the time Atlas began clawing at the floorboards of that old cabin, Caleb understood the land had never been worthless. Buried beneath it was a bunker filled with money, records, and a secret powerful people had already killed to protect. And the moment Caleb opened the first hidden door, the past he had spent a lifetime trying to forget began coming back. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The door didn't slam. It closed slowly, too controlled, too deliberate. And somehow, that made it worse. Retired veteran Caleb Turner stood on the porch with a single worn duffel bag at his feet. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street. The house behind him was the same one he had helped build with his own hands 30 years ago. The same porch where he had once held his daughter as a baby, rocking her through sleepless nights. The same front door that had always meant home. Now it meant nothing. "You can't keep doing this, Dad," his daughter Emily had said just moments ago. Her voice wasn't angry. That would have been easier. It was tired. Final. "We tried. We really did. But this isn't working anymore." Caleb hadn't argued. What was there left to say? The night before had been like so many others. The dreams had come again, loud, violent, too real. Helicopter blades chopping the sky, sand in his mouth, the crack of gunfire echoing through narrow streets that never left his head. He had woken up shouting, heart hammering, fists clenched as if he were still there. Only this time he'd knocked over a lamp. Shattered glass. His grandson crying from the hallway. His son-in-law standing in the doorway, eyes filled with something Caleb recognized all too well. Fear. That had been the moment everything ended. "You scared him, Dad," Emily had whispered. "You scared all of us." Now the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Caleb picked up the duffel bag. It felt lighter than it should have. Maybe because everything that mattered wasn't in it. A soft nudge brushed against his leg. Atlas, the German shepherd, stood beside him, steady and silent, amber eyes locked on Caleb's face. The dog's ears twitched slightly, reading him, the way he always did. No judgment, no hesitation, just presence. Caleb exhaled slowly and reached down, resting a hand on Atlas's head. The thick fur was warm under his fingers. "Well," he muttered, voice rough. "Guess it's just you and me now." Atlas didn't move. Didn't need to. The bond between them had been forged long before this moment, somewhere between sleepless nights, empty mornings, and the kind of silence that most people couldn't understand. Caleb turned away from the house. He didn't look back. Not when he stepped off the porch. Not when he walked down the driveway. Not even when he reached the rusted pickup truck parked along the curb. Looking back was dangerous. Looking back meant remembering. And remembering meant feeling. He opened the truck door, the metal creaking in protest. He tossed the duffel bag onto the passenger seat. Atlas jumped in beside it with practiced ease, settling into his spot as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The engine turned over after a couple tries, coughing to life like an old man clearing his throat. Caleb rested his hands on the steering wheel, staring out at the street. Normal life. Kids riding bikes. A lawnmower humming in the distance. A neighbor watering flowers like the world wasn't quietly breaking apart in someone else's driveway. Caleb tightened his grip on the wheel. For a second. Just a second. The sound of the lawnmower twisted in his mind. It wasn't a mower anymore. It was a rotor. Low. Heavy. Closing in. His breath hitched. Atlas moved instantly. A firm weight pressed against Caleb's arm as the dog leaned into him, grounding him, pulling him back. Caleb blinked hard. The street came back into focus. The noise snapped back into something ordinary. He swallowed, forcing air into his lungs. "I'm good," he said under his breath. Though it wasn't clear who he was saying it to, Atlas didn't move away. He stayed right there until Caleb's hands stopped shaking. After a moment, Caleb shifted the truck into gear and pulled away from the curb. No destination, no plan. Just forward. The road stretched ahead of him in a long gray line, cutting through neighborhoods that all looked the same. He drove without thinking, letting muscle memory do the work while his mind drifted somewhere between past and present. Time blurred. Minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, the city thinned out. Houses gave way to open stretches of land, then to quiet roads bordered by fields and scattered trees. The sky seemed bigger out here, wider, emptier. Caleb didn't notice when the sun dipped lower, didn't notice when the shadows grew longer. He only stopped when Atlas shifted beside him again, letting out a low, soft sound. Caleb glanced down. "Yeah," he murmured. "You're right. They needed to stop." He pulled into a small gas station off a rural highway, one of those places that looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years. A flickering neon sign buzzed above the door. Two old pumps stood out front like forgotten relics. Caleb killed the engine. Silence. Not the bad kind, just quiet. He leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes for a moment. That's when he noticed it. The envelope. It sat on the dashboard, half hidden under a folded map. He didn't remember picking up. Thick. Official. His name typed clean across the front. Caleb Turner. He frowned. He hadn't seen it before. Or maybe he had and just hadn't noticed. Slowly, he reached for it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Atlas watched him closely. Caleb turned the envelope over. A law firm's name was stamped in the corner. Clean. Formal. Out of place in his world. He hesitated, then tore it open. Inside was a letter and a single key. The key was old, solid brass, worn smooth from use. Caleb stared at it for a long moment before unfolding the letter. His eyes moved across the page. At first, nothing registered. Just words. Legal language. Names. Then one line hit. You have been named the sole inheritor of a parcel of land, totaling approximately 500 acres. Caleb blinked. Read it again. Located in rural Wyoming. His brow furrowed. Wyoming? And he hadn't been there in decades. Another line. As stipulated in the will of Marcus Hale. Caleb froze. The name hit like a punch to the chest. Marcus. For a second, the world tilted. Dust. Heat. The sharp crack of gunfire. A voice shouting his name across a narrow street that no longer existed anywhere except in his head. Caleb's fingers tightened around the paper. Marcus Hale. He hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. Hadn't said it. Hadn't allowed himself to remember it. Because remembering meant going back. And going back meant everything he had spent a lifetime trying to bury. Atlas let out a low whine. Caleb looked down at the dog, his expression tightening. I thought you were gone, he whispered. The letter crinkled in his hand. There was more. Something about unpaid taxes, a potential sale, and a company interested in acquiring the land. But Caleb wasn't reading that part anymore. His eyes were locked on the name, Marcus Hale, the man who had saved his life, the man who had disappeared, the man who, as far as Caleb knew, was dead. Caleb leaned back in the seat, the letter trembling slightly in his grip. The past wasn't done with him. Not even close. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the dry grass along the edge of the road. Atlas lifted his head, ears alert, as if sensing something Caleb couldn't yet see. Or maybe something Caleb had spent years refusing to. Caleb looked down at the key in his hand. Heavy, real, a piece of something unfinished. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling in. No such thing as coincidence, he muttered. Atlas's tail gave a single, slow thump against the seat. Caleb nodded once. Decision made. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared back to life. All right, he said quietly. Let's see what you left behind, Marcus. The truck pulled back onto the highway, disappearing into the deepening light of dusk. Ahead of them, somewhere beyond the horizon, waited 500 acres of land no one wanted. And something buried beneath it. Something that had been waiting a very long time. For him, the highway stretched on like a promise Caleb didn't trust. Wyoming. He hadn't said the word out loud yet, but it sat heavy in his chest, like something unfinished, clawing its way back to the surface. The sky darkened as he drove, turning from pale blue to deep amber, then finally to a cold, endless black. Atlas hadn't moved much since they left the gas station, and he lay still, eyes open, watching the road as if he understood they were heading somewhere that mattered. Caleb gripped the wheel tighter. Marcus Hale. The name refused to stay buried. They had served together in a place most people only saw on the news. Dust-choked streets, heat that never let up, days that blurred into nights filled with tension so thick you could feel it in your bones. Marcus had been the steady one, the kind of man who didn't panic, didn't hesitate, the kind of man who came back for you. Caleb swallowed. He could still hear it sometimes, the moment everything went wrong. The radio crackling, orders overlapping, then silence. Too much silence. He shook his head, forcing the memory down. Not now. The truck rolled past a faded road sign. Wyoming state line. Caleb slowed slightly, eyes flicking toward it. Oh well, he muttered. Guess we're really doing this. Atlas lifted his head, ears forward. The road narrowed as they pushed deeper into the state. Fewer cars, fewer lights, the kind of empty that made a man feel small. By the time Caleb found a place to pull over for the night, the stars had already taken over the sky. He parked along a gravel turnout overlooking a stretch of dark, open land that seemed to go on forever. No houses, no noise, just wind. He killed the engine, and the silence settled around them like a blanket. Not the kind that comforts, the kind that listens. Caleb leaned back, staring out through the windshield. For a moment, everything was still. No memories, no voices. Just the steady rhythm of his own breathing. Atlas shifted, then carefully climbed over the console, pressing his body against Caleb's chest. And Caleb let out a slow breath and wrapped an arm around him. Yeah, he whispered. I know. They stayed like that for a while. Man and dog sitting in the dark, holding the line against everything that tried to creep back in. Morning came cold, the kind of cold that cuts through your clothes before you even realize it's there. Caleb stepped out of the truck, boots crunching against gravel. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper. Pine and dry earth carried on a steady breeze that rolled down from the distant hills. Atlas jumped down beside him, immediately alert. Caleb stretched his back, joints stiff from sleeping upright. His eyes scanned the horizon. Mountains, low at first, then rising higher in the distance, their peaks catching the early light. The land out here wasn't soft. It didn't invite you in. Instead, it tested you. Caleb nodded slightly. Feels about right. He grabbed the folded map from the passenger seat, smoothing it out against the hood of the truck. The coordinates from the letter had been marked in red pen. Someone had made sure he could find it, or wanted him to. That thought lingered longer than it should have. Atlas let out a low growl. Caleb looked up. Nothing there. Just wind moving through grass. But Atlas didn't relax. Caleb watched him for a second, then folded the map again. Let's keep moving. The paved road gave way to dirt about 20 miles in. The truck rattled over uneven ground, dust kicking up behind them in a long trail. Trees began to close in, tall and thin, their shadows stretching across the path like fingers. The deeper they went, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects. Now just the engine and the occasional creak of old suspension. Caleb's grip tightened again. Something about this place felt off. Atlas stood up in the seat now, ears rigid, nose working the air. His body had shifted completely, no longer relaxed, no longer just along for the ride. He was on alert. What is it? Caleb asked quietly. Atlas didn't answer, but his gaze locked forward. Caleb followed it. The road curved ahead, disappearing into thicker trees. For a second, just a second, Caleb thought he saw movement, a flicker, then nothing. He slowed the truck. The engine idled low as they rolled forward. Every instinct he had learned, every lesson drilled into him years ago, stirred awake. Watch the edges. Don't trust the quiet. If it feels wrong, it is. Caleb exhaled slowly. Just your head, he muttered. But Atlas didn't agree. The cabin came into view without warning. One moment, trees, the next, a clearing. And in the middle of it, a structure that barely qualified as a house. The truck rolled to a stop. Caleb stared at it through the windshield. The wood was gray and weathered, sagging under its own weight. The roof dipped in the center like it had given up years ago. One side leaned slightly, as if the whole thing might collapse if the wind pushed just a little harder. "This is it?" Caleb said under his breath. Atlas didn't move. Caleb stepped out slowly, boots sinking slightly into dry soil. The air here felt heavier somehow, still, too still. He walked a few steps forward, eyes scanning the structure. No tracks, no signs of life. Nothing suggested anyone had been there in a very long time. His chest tightened. "All 500 acres, he muttered. "And this is what it comes with." Atlas finally moved, jumping down and circling the clearing. Not exploring, searching. Caleb noticed it immediately. The dog's nose stayed low to the ground, movements sharp and deliberate. He wasn't curious. He was tracking. Caleb frowned. "What are you picking up?" Atlas didn't stop. He moved toward the cabin, then paused near the front steps. His ears flicked, head tilting slightly. Then a low growl rumbled in his chest. Caleb felt it before he understood it. That same instinct again. The one that never really left. He stepped closer, hand unconsciously tightening into a fist. The cabin door hung crooked, barely attached. A single window was boarded up, the wood warped and cracked. Caleb reached out, pushing the door open, and it creaked loud in the silence. Inside, dust, decay, and something else. He stepped in slowly. The floorboards groaned under his weight. A table, one chair, an old stove. Nothing of value, nothing worth inheriting. Caleb let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah," he muttered, "that figures." Behind him, Atlas entered, but instead of stopping, instead of staying close, he moved deeper inside, straight to the center of the room, and began to dig, hard. Wood splintered under his paws. Caleb's expression shifted. "Hey." Atlas didn't stop. Faster now, desperate. His claws scraped, dug, tore at the floorboards like something underneath was calling to him. Then, a crack. One board shifted. Caleb stepped forward quickly, dropping to one knee. "Easy, easy." Atlas backed off just enough, panting, eyes locked on the spot. And Caleb pried the board up and froze. Beneath it, metal, an old military box, dust-covered, hidden, waiting. Caleb stared at it, something deep inside him tightening. "Well," he whispered slowly, "guess this place isn't empty after all." The words barely left Caleb's mouth, before the air in the cabin seemed to change. He stared at the metal box for a long moment, his hand hovering just above it. The surface was scratched, worn, and painted in a dull olive color that instantly pulled something from deep inside his memory. Military issue, no doubt about it. Atlas stepped closer again, nose brushing the edge of the opening, then pulling back sharply as if something about it unsettled him. His ears stayed pinned forward, body tense, waiting. Caleb finally reached down and gripped the edge of the box. It was heavier than it looked. He lifted it slowly, muscles straining just enough to remind him he wasn't the man he used to be. Years had passed. Too many. But some things stayed, buried beneath age, beneath silence, beneath everything he'd tried to forget. He set the box down on the floor beside him. Dust rose in a soft cloud. Caleb wiped his hands on his jeans, then examined the latch. Simple, old, unlocked. He hesitated. Not because he was afraid of what was inside, but because of what it meant. Nothing about this place was random anymore. Not Marcus, not the land, not this box. Atlas let out a low, quiet whine. Caleb glanced at him. "You feel it too, huh?" The dog didn't blink. Caleb exhaled slowly, then flipped the latch. The lid creaked as it opened. Inside, money, stacks of it, neatly bundled. Old bills, and wrapped tight with faded paper bands. Caleb blinked, leaning in closer. He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. There was more money in that box than he had seen in years, maybe decades. But it wasn't the money that made his chest tighten. It was what sat beneath it. A folded piece of paper and a key. Caleb carefully moved one of the bundles aside and pulled the paper free. It was brittle, yellowed with age, Edges worn from being handled, he unfolded it slowly. A map. Rough. Hand-drawn. The cabin was marked clearly, and about 50 feet behind it, an X. A single word was written beside it in firm, deliberate strokes. Below. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Below. A slow, familiar tension crept into his chest again. Atlas stepped back, then turned, walking toward the open doorway of the cabin. He stopped there, still looking out into the clearing, waiting. Caleb looked from the map to the door, then back again. "Marcus, what did you leave me?" He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket, then picked up the key. It was newer than the box, steel, clean, out of place with everything else, different purpose. Caleb stood. Atlas didn't wait. He stepped outside first, scanning the clearing with a quiet intensity that made Caleb's skin prickle. The wind had picked up slightly, moving through the trees in a slow, whispering motion. Caleb followed. The clearing stretched wide around them, the cabin at its center like something forgotten. The ground behind it sloped gently upward toward a rocky outcrop partially hidden by thick brush. That was where Atlas was looking. Caleb moved toward him. Each step felt heavier than it should have. Not physically. Something else. Like walking toward a memory he didn't want to remember. Atlas moved ahead, pushing through the brush without hesitation. Caleb followed. Branches scraping against his arms, dry leaves crunching underfoot. The air grew cooler the closer they got to the rocks. Then Atlas stopped. Dead still. Caleb pushed through the last of the brush and saw it. At first it didn't register, just rock. Flat. Natural. Then the edges caught his eye. Too clean. Too straight. He stepped closer, brushed dirt and debris aside with his boot, and there it was, a seam, perfectly cut into the stone, a door. Caleb's pulse slowed, then deepened. No way. Atlas let out a low growl. Caleb crouched down, fingers tracing along the edge, cold metal beneath the thin layer of dust. Hidden in plain sight, military. Again, he found the keyhole near the center, and beside it a small circular indentation. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out the key. His hand paused. The wind stopped. Completely. Silence dropped over the clearing like a weight. Even Atlas didn't move. Caleb swallowed. Last chance to walk away, he muttered. But he already knew he wasn't going to. He slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He turned it. A deep, heavy clunk echoed beneath the ground. Atlas flinched slightly, stepping back. Then Caleb noticed the second piece. The circular metal tag attached to the key. He held it up, comparing it to the indentation beside the lock. Same size, same shape. He pressed it in. For a second, nothing. Then a low hum. Subtle at first, then growing. Caleb felt it through the soles of his boots. Machinery. Old, but still alive. The ground vibrated slightly. Atlas barked once. Sharp. Warning. Then the stone shifted. Slowly. A seam widened. Dust fell away. And the entire slab began to rise. Not like a door. Like something engineered. Heavy. Deliberate. Ancient. And precise all at once. Cold air rushed out from below, brushing against Caleb's face. It smelled different. Not decay, not earth. Something sterile, something controlled. The opening widened until it revealed a set of concrete stairs descending into darkness. Complete darkness. Caleb stared down into it. His chest tightened. The world above, the trees, the wind, the sky felt distant now, like it belonged to someone else. Atlas moved closer again and stood at Caleb's side. Not afraid, but ready. Always ready. Caleb swallowed. "This isn't just a bunker," he said quietly. No answer. Just silence. And the dark waiting below. He reached back into the box, pulling out the small hand-crank flashlight. He turned it, building a faint charge, then clicked it on. A weak beam cut through the darkness. Enough. It would have to be. Caleb stepped forward. One foot on the first step, then the second. Atlas followed immediately. Close. Always close. The deeper they went, the colder it got. The light above faded quickly, swallowed by the narrow shaft of concrete around them. Their footsteps echoed softly. The sound was unnatural in the tight space. Caleb counted, without realizing it. 5 steps. 10, 15. His breathing slowed, focused, controlled, like it used to be. And at the bottom, the beam of light landed on something solid. Another door. Steel. Sealed. No handle. Just a panel. And a single red button. Caleb stopped. His heart beat steady now. Not panicked. Not lost. Something else. Something older. Atlas stood beside him. Eyes locked forward. Waiting. Caleb raised his hand, paused, then pressed the button. For a moment, nothing. Then the hum returned. Louder now. Locks disengaging, one by one. A deep mechanical rhythm that echoed through the chamber. Then, light. A thin line at first, then more. Fluorescent. Harsh. Unforgiving. The door slid open. Slow. Silent. Caleb didn't move. Not yet. Because what waited beyond that door was no longer just a mystery. It was something far bigger. And for the first time in years, Caleb Turner didn't feel lost. But he felt like he had just stepped back into a war. One he had never actually left. Caleb stood in the doorway for a long second, letting his eyes adjust to the harsh fluorescent light. It buzzed faintly overhead, steady, mechanical, indifferent. Atlas stepped in first, careful, measured. The dog's paws made soft, echoing sounds against the smooth concrete floor as he moved ahead, scanning every corner of the space with quiet intensity. Caleb followed. The door slid shut behind them with a low, final sound. No turning back. The air inside the bunker was cool, dry, and strangely clean. Not the damp, suffocating kind he expected from something buried underground for years. This place had been built to last, built to function, built for something. A long hallway stretched out in front of him. Doors lined both sides, and everything was intact, preserved, waiting. Caleb took a slow breath. "Marcus," he muttered under his breath. Atlas paused halfway down the corridor, glancing back as if to check Caleb was still there. "I'm coming," Caleb said quietly. They moved together. The first door creaked slightly as Caleb pushed it open. A kitchen, compact, but complete. Metal counters, a small refrigerator, cabinets stocked with sealed containers and labeled cans. Everything arranged with military precision. Caleb ran his fingers across the surface of the counter. Dust, but thin. Not years, not decades. Just enough to show time had passed. This wasn't abandoned, he murmured. Atlas sniffed along the edges of the room, then turned away uninterested. The next door, a bathroom. Functional, clean, a faint metallic smell lingering in the air. On the next, a sleeping quarters. 2 bunks, blankets still folded tight. Caleb stopped there. 2 beds, not one. He stared at them longer than he meant to, then turned away. They continued down the hall. Each step felt heavier, each room more intentional. This wasn't survival. This was preparation. At the end of the hallway, the space opened into a larger room, a living area, a desk, shelves filled with books, engineering, communications, encryption. Caleb's chest tightened. This wasn't just a bunker. This was a command post. Atlas walked ahead, nose twitching, then stopped near the desk. He didn't move. Caleb approached slowly. On the desk sat a tape recorder, old, analog, and beside it, a stack of labeled tapes. Neat, ordered, deliberate. Caleb's eyes locked onto the top one. On the label was written in block letters. For Caleb. His breath caught. For a moment the room seemed to tilt slightly. He reached out, fingers brushing against the tape. It was real. Not memory. Not imagination. Real. Atlas let out a soft, low sound. Caleb glanced down at him. "I know," he said quietly. "I see it." His hands weren't shaking this time. That surprised him, maybe because something inside him had already accepted what this meant. He picked up the tape, turned it over once. then slid it into the recorder. The click echoed louder than it should have. Caleb sat down slowly in the chair. Atlas lay down beside him, pressed close against his leg. "Ready?" Caleb murmured. Then he hesitated. Just for a second. Because once he pressed play, there was no going back. He exhaled, then pressed the button. The tape whirred, and a soft crackle filled the room. Static. Then a voice. "If you're hearing this, then I didn't make it." Caleb froze. The sound hit him harder than anything else had so far. Not the bunker, not the money, not even the name. The voice belonged to Marcus, older, worn, but unmistakable. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I knew it," he whispered. Atlas lifted his head slightly, ears twitching at the sound. The tape continued. "Caleb, I don't know how much you remember. Hell, I don't even know what they left in your head after that day." Caleb's chest tightened again. After that day, the words echoed. Images flickered at the edge of his mind. Dust, smoke, a street collapsing into chaos. He clenched his fists. The tape crackled softly. "If things went the way I think they did, you were never supposed to come back to this. None of it. That was the plan." Caleb leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the recorder. "What plan?" he murmured. Marcus's voice dropped lower. "We found something, Caleb. Bigger than anything we were supposed to see. Bigger than command. Bigger than the war itself." A pause. Like even on the recording, he was choosing his words carefully. "They told us it was intel, routine, just another operation. But it wasn't. It was money, movement, names. The kind of names you don't say out loud." Caleb's pulse slowed, focused. Every word pulling him deeper. They weren't just moving money through the war. They were controlling it, creating it, feeding it. Another pause. "If you're hearing this, it means they didn't bury everything." Caleb swallowed. "They came after us, didn't they?" he whispered. The tape hissed, and then they shut it down. Clean, fast. Said it was an accident. "You remember that, don't you?" Caleb's breath caught. The memory slammed into him without warning. A convoy. A flash. Heat. Sound disappearing. His ears ringing. His body thrown. Then nothing. Darkness. Caleb sucked in a sharp breath, his hand gripping the edge of the desk. Atlas immediately pushed closer, pressing against him, grounding him, keeping him here. Caleb closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again, focused. The tape continued. "I did what I could," Marcus said. "I got out, barely, but I couldn't bring you with me. They were already watching. Anyone connected to you was next." Caleb's expression hardened. "They made me disappear," Marcus went on, "and I stayed that way. Built this place, kept everything here, waited." Caleb looked around the room again, the bunker, the supplies, the system, all of it. "For this, for you," Marcus said. Caleb's throat tightened. "I couldn't fix what they did, couldn't give you your memory back, couldn't give you your life back." A long pause. "But I could leave you the truth." The tape crackled softly. "And Caleb, if they know you're here." The words hung in the air, unfinished and heavy. "Then it's already started." The tape clicked. Silence. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Caleb didn't move. Didn't breathe. For a moment, everything was still. Then Atlas let out a low, quiet sound. Caleb looked down at him slowly. "They erased it," Caleb said. His voice was different now, steadier, colder. "They took it out of my head." Atlas held his gaze. Caleb nodded once. "Oh yeah," he whispered. "That makes sense." He leaned back in the chair, staring at the recorder, at the tape, at the past that had just come roaring back into his life. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to know this wasn't over. Not even close. He looked around the bunker again, different this time. Not as a stranger, but as someone who had been here before. In ways he couldn't fully remember. "They thought I'd never come back," he said quietly. Atlas's ears flicked. Caleb stood up slowly, the weight of everything settling into place. They were wrong. The hum of the bunker filled the silence. And somewhere above them, the wind moved through the trees, carrying something with it. Something unseen. Something waiting. Caleb turned toward the hallway. There were more rooms, more answers. And somewhere in all of it, was the reason Marcus had chosen him. The reason this place had been left untouched. The reason it had been waiting. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Let's find the rest of it," he said. Atlas stood immediately, ready, always ready, and together they stepped deeper into the truth. The hallway seemed longer now, not because it had changed, but because Caleb had. Every step echoed differently. He wasn't just exploring anymore, he was remembering. Atlas moved ahead, slower this time, his body low, alert. His nose traced the air, picking up something Caleb couldn't yet feel, but knew was there. A presence, not visible, but real. Caleb's eyes scanned every inch of the corridor. The walls, the seams, the faint scratches that didn't belong to time, but to use. Recent use? And the thought slipped in without warning. He didn't like it. At the end of the hall, another door waited, different from the others. Thicker, reinforced. Caleb reached for the handle, paused, then opened it. The room inside was colder, much colder. Lights flickered on as they stepped in, revealing rows of metal cabinets lining the walls. At the center stood a large steel table covered in files, devices, and something that looked like a compact server system. Caleb stepped closer. Atlas didn't follow immediately. He stayed near the door, watching, guarding. Caleb ran his hand across the table. Clean. Too clean. Someone had been here, not long ago. His jaw tightened. Marcus said they were watching, he muttered. His eyes moved to the cabinets. Each one labeled dates, locations, operations. He pulled one open. Inside were folders, hundreds of them, each tagged with codes and names. Caleb grabbed the first one and opened it. Photos, documents, bank transfers, surveillance logs. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. Scanning, processing, patterns, connections, money flowing through shell companies, military contracts, private security firms, and then a name, Redstone Dominion. Caleb froze. There it was, clear, repeated, embedded in transaction after transaction. He flipped through more pages, same name, different operations, different regions, always there, always connected. "This isn't just corruption," Caleb whispered. "It's control." Atlas let out a low growl from behind him. Caleb turned slightly. "What is it?" The dog's eyes were locked not on the hallway, but on the far wall of the room, and Caleb followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing, then a small red light, blinking, slow, steady. Not part of the original system, too modern, too active. Caleb's stomach dropped. No. He stepped closer. The light blinked again. A camera. Hidden. Watching. His breath slowed instantly. Everything sharpened. "They know," he said quietly. Atlas's growl deepened. Caleb reached up and ripped the device from the wall, yanking the wires free. The light died, but it was too late. They already saw us. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Caleb turned in a slow circle, eyes scanning every corner. "Marcus, you knew this would happen," he muttered. His mind moved faster now, connecting pieces. The land, the debt, the offer to buy it cheap. It wasn't about the property. It was about this place, about what was hidden inside it. Atlas suddenly barked, sharp, urgent. Caleb spun toward the hallway. Footsteps, faint, but there, above them, on the surface. Caleb's entire body went still, listening, counting. At least 2, maybe more, moving carefully, searching. He exhaled slowly. There early, Atlas moved closer, pressing against him, ready, always ready. Caleb set the file down and moved quickly to the table, scanning the equipment. His hands moved without hesitation now, instinct guiding him. He found what he needed. A small monitor, still powered, still connected. He flipped it on. Static. Then, a grainy image appeared, black and white. The cabin. 2 figures outside, dressed in dark clothing, moving with purpose. Not locals, not hikers, professionals. Caleb's expression hardened. "They're not here to talk." Atlas growled again, louder now. Caleb reached down, resting his hand briefly on the dog's neck. I know. He looked back at the screen. The figures were splitting up, one moving toward the cabin, the other circling wide, cutting off exits. Caleb's jaw clenched. They think I'm still the same man. He stood straight, something inside him settling into place. Not fear, not confusion, focus. They're wrong. Atlas stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead, body angled toward the hallway. Protecting. Always protecting. Caleb moved quickly around the room, grabbing what he could. Flashlight, a small pack, anything useful. Then he stopped. His eyes returned to the files. To the truth. All of it. If he left it here, they'd take it, destroy it, and erase everything Marcus had tried to preserve. Caleb made a decision. Fast. Final. He grabbed a stack of drives from the table and shoved them into the pack. It goes with us, Atlas barked once. Agreement. Above them, a door slammed. The sound echoed faintly through the structure. They were inside. Caleb turned toward the hallway, his breathing steady, his mind clear. For the first time in years, everything made sense. The nightmares, the fragments, the feeling that something had been taken from him. It hadn't been just trauma. It had been truth. And now, they wanted to take it again. Caleb stepped toward the stairs. Atlas at his side. No hesitation. No doubt. Only one direction left. Forward. As they reached the base of the stairs, Caleb paused just for a second. He looked down at Atlas. If things go bad, Caleb began. Atlas didn't look away. Caleb gave a faint, tired smile. Yeah, I know. He placed his hand on the dog's head briefly, then turned back toward the darkness above, toward the men who thought they were hunting him, toward the fight he had never truly left behind. Caleb took the first step up, and the war followed him. Each step echoed louder than it should have, not because of the bunker, but because of what waited above. Atlas moved just ahead of him, body low, silent, every muscle coiled tight. The dog didn't hesitate, didn't look back. He knew. They reached the top. Caleb stopped just short of the hatch, listened. Wind, faint movement, footsteps. Closer now. He glanced at Atlas. The dog's ears flicked once, two, maybe three. Caleb exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Not panic, not anymore. But the old rhythm was back. Observe. Wait. Move. He reached up and slowly lifted the hatch just enough to see through the narrow gap. The forest beyond was darker now. Clouds had rolled in, muting the sunlight. The trees swayed gently, casting shifting shadows across the ground. And there, movement. A man near the cabin. Another circling toward the rear. Professional spacing. Coordinated. Caleb lowered the hatch silently. They're sweeping, he whispered. Atlas gave a soft, low growl. Caleb's mind moved fast. The bunker wasn't just a refuge. It was a trap. If he stayed too long, they'll find the entrance, he muttered. And once they did, everything below would be gone. Marcus's truth, wiped clean. Caleb's jaw tightened. No. He wasn't losing this again. He looked down at Atlas. We don't hide, he said quietly. Atlas's tail stiffened. Agreement. Caleb pushed the hatch open. Slow. Controlled. He stepped out first. Atlas followed instantly. The cold mountain air hit Caleb's face, sharp and real. For a second, it grounded him. Then, a voice. Cabin's clear. Close. Too close. Caleb dropped low behind the rocks, pulling Atlas with him. He could see the man now. Mid. 30S. Dark clothing, earpiece, weapons strapped to his chest. Not law enforcement, not military, private. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Redstone. The man turned slightly, scanning the tree line. Another voice crackled faintly through his earpiece. Nothing on the east side. Move in. Caleb felt his pulse slow, not racing, sharpening. He leaned closer to Atlas, barely moving his lips. Stay with me. Atlas didn't blink. Caleb shifted position, keeping low, using the rocks and brush for cover. Years fell away from him, not in body but in instinct. He wasn't lost anymore. He knew this terrain. He knew this game. The second man moved closer to the cabin door. The first step toward the trees, toward Caleb. Caleb's breathing slowed, measured. He waited. 3 steps. 2. 1. Now. He moved. Fast. Silent. He came up behind the man, one arm locking around his shoulders, pulling him off balance. The man barely had time to react before Caleb forced him down hard into the dirt. A muffled grunt. Struggle. Atlas was there instantly, teeth bared, low growl vibrating through the air. The man froze. Caleb leaned in close. "Don't," he said quietly. The tone alone was enough. The man went still, and Caleb's grip tightened just enough to make the point clear. "Who sent you?" Caleb asked. No answer. "Of course." Caleb exhaled through his nose. "Redstone," he said. "Not a question." A slight hesitation. That was enough. Caleb released him suddenly and shoved him forward. The man stumbled, trying to regain footing. Atlas lunged forward with a sharp bark, stopping him cold. Caleb stepped back. "Go," he said. The man didn't hesitate this time. He ran, fast, disappearing into the trees. Caleb watched him go. He could have stopped him, but that wasn't the point. "They know I'm not running," Caleb murmured. Atlas stood beside him, still tense. Caleb turned toward the cabin. The second man was gone, retreated, regrouping. This wasn't over. Not even close. Caleb walked slowly back toward the bunker entrance, but the forest felt different now. Not quiet. Watching, waiting. "They're going to come back," he said. Atlas huffed softly. Caleb crouched near the entrance, brushing dirt back over the seams, masking it again. Not perfect, but enough. For now, he stood, looking out across the land. 500 acres. Isolation. No neighbors. No help. Just him. And Atlas against something far bigger. Caleb's hand rested briefly on the dog's head. "They picked the wrong place," he said quietly. Atlas's tail flicked once. Caleb looked back toward the cabin, toward the life he had lost, the man he had been, and the man he was becoming again. "They think this is about land," he said. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. "They still don't understand." The wind moved through the trees again. Stronger now, almost carrying something with it. Not fear, not anymore. Resolve. Caleb turned toward the cabin. "Come on," he said. Atlas followed immediately, and as they walked, the past no longer chased him. It walked beside him, ready, waiting, and this time, Caleb Turner was ready too. The cabin felt smaller when they stepped back inside, not physically, but because Caleb could see everything now, every crack in the wood, every loose board, every shadow near the windows. Nothing escaped him anymore. Not after what he'd just seen. Atlas moved through the room first, checking corners, pausing at the doorway, then circling back. Clear. For now, Caleb closed the door quietly behind them. "They'll be back," he said under his breath. Not fear, just fact. He moved straight to the loose floorboard. No hesitation this time, no doubt. And he pulled it up and reached down, lifting the metal box again. The weight didn't bother him anymore. It grounded him. He carried it to the table and opened it once more. Money, map, key. But now he knew that had only been the beginning. Marcus didn't leave this just to survive. Caleb murmured. He left it to expose something. Atlas watched him closely. Caleb reached into his pack and pulled out the drives he'd taken from the bunker. Small, unassuming, but heavy with meaning. He set them down carefully, then looked around the cabin. No power, no network, nothing to access what was inside. He exhaled slowly. Not here. He grabbed the map again, studying it more closely this time. The markings weren't just directions. There were symbols, notations Marcus had added, points of interest. And one of them, not far from the cabin, a secondary mark, smaller, labeled with a single word. Relay. Caleb's eyes narrowed. A backup system, he said. Atlas's ears flicked. Or a way out. He folded the map and slipped it into his jacket. Come on. They stepped outside again. The forest had gone quieter. Too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate between the trees. Caleb moved carefully, keeping low, using the terrain instinctively. Atlas stayed just ahead, leading, sensing. The direction was clear. East, through a narrow stretch of trees where the ground dipped slightly, forming a shallow path hidden from above, perfect for staying unseen. They moved fast, not running, but not wasting time. After about 10 minutes, Atlas stopped suddenly. His body went rigid. Caleb froze, listened, nothing. Then, a faint hum. Electrical, low. Caleb stepped forward slowly, brushing aside a cluster of dry branches. And there it was, half buried in the earth, a metal hatch, smaller than the first, more concealed. He crouched down, clearing the surface. No lock, no keyhole, just a panel. And beside it, a small keypad. Caleb frowned. Marcus, what did you set up? Atlas sniffed the edges, then stepped back. Caleb stared at the keypad. Then something clicked. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the dog tag he'd taken from the box. Marcus's tag. He turned it over. Numbers. Engraved beneath the name. Caleb's heart slowed. He entered the sequence, one digit at a time. A pause. Then, a soft beep. The hatch unlocked. Caleb let out a slow breath. Still looking out for me, he whispered. He lifted the hatch, went inside. A narrow chamber, compact, but alive. Lights flickered on automatically. A small workstation sat against the far wall powered by a humming battery system. Screens, equipment, antennas wired through the earth above. A relay station, hidden, secure. Caleb stepped inside. Atlas followed. The hatch closed behind them with a quiet click. Caleb moved to the console. The system was old, but functional. He inserted one of the drives. The screen flickered. Then, data. Rows of files, encrypted folders, names, numbers, transactions. Caleb scrolled. And then, he saw it. Redstone Dominion. Not just a company. A network. Shell corporations, military contracts, foreign accounts, billions moving silently through war zones, reconstruction funds, private security operations, all tied together, all hidden. Caleb leaned closer. His eyes moved quickly now, recognizing patterns, routes, operations. This wasn't just corruption. It was a machine, and it had been running for years. Marcus hadn't just uncovered it. He had mapped it. Caleb swallowed. They weren't just silencing us, he said quietly. They were protecting this. Atlas sat beside him, watching. Caleb clicked another file. A list appeared. Names. Dozens of them. Executives, officials, people with power, people who could make things disappear. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then his breath caught. One name stood out. Familiar. Too familiar. Howard Pike, the lawyer, the one who had sent him the letter, the one who had brought him here. Caleb stared at the screen. No. His voice dropped. That doesn't make sense. But it did. Too much. The inheritance, the urgency, the pressure to sell. It wasn't random. It was controlled. Atlas let out a low sound. Caleb leaned back slowly. They didn't expect me to survive this long, he said. They expected me to sign. Walk away. He looked back at the screen, at the truth laid out in front of him, and when I didn't. His eyes hardened. They sent people. The weight of it settled over him. Not just betrayal. Not just danger. A system built to erase anyone who got too close. Caleb reached down, resting his hand on Atlas. They picked the wrong man, he said quietly. Atlas's ears lifted. Caleb looked at the screen one more time, then pulled the drive out, carefully, deliberately. This doesn't stay here, he said. He packed everything back up, shut down the system. The lights dimmed. Silence returned. But Caleb moved to the hatch, paused for just a moment, then looked back into the small room. Marcus had built this, risked everything, left it all behind for him. Caleb nodded once. I won't waste it. He opened the hatch. Cold air rushed in again. Atlas climbed out first. Caleb followed. The forest greeted them again. But it wasn't the same forest. Not anymore. Now, it was a battlefield. And somewhere out there, the people behind Redstone were already moving, already adjusting, already preparing. Caleb stood still for a moment, listening, feeling, remembering. Then he turned. Time to finish this, he said. Atlas stood beside him, ready, always ready. And together, they disappeared back into the trees. The forest swallowed them quickly. Branches closed behind their path. Footsteps softened into nothing. And within seconds, it was as if they had never been there at all. Caleb moved with quiet precision, weaving through the terrain as if guided by something deeper than memory. Atlas stayed just ahead, pausing at intervals, scanning, listening. They didn't return to the cabin. Not yet. Caleb knew better now. They'll be watching it, he said under his breath. Atlas's ears flicked in agreement. The sky above had darkened further, clouds pressing low over the mountains. The air felt heavier, a storm building, or something like it. Caleb slowed as they reached a narrow ridge overlooking the clearing. From here, the cabin was visible, and so were they. 2 vehicles now, parked at a distance. More men, moving in coordinated patterns, not searching anymore, securing. Caleb's jaw tightened. They escalated fast. Atlas let out a low, steady growl. Caleb crouched, watching, studying, counting. 4, maybe 5. Different from before. More prepared, more aggressive. They know what's down there, he said, and they're not leaving without it. He shifted slightly, scanning the perimeter. Patterns, blind spots, movement cycles. His mind mapped everything automatically. Old instincts, sharpened by something new, clarity. For the first time in years, his thoughts weren't scattered. They were aligned, focused. Caleb reached into his pocket, pulling out the drive. The weight of it felt heavier now. Not just data, truth, danger, a decision. Atlas turned his head toward him. Caleb met his gaze. They're not going to stop, he said quietly. Atlas didn't move. Didn't need to. Caleb exhaled slowly. 2 paths. He could feel them clearly now. Walk away, sell the land, disappear, or stay. Fight, expose everything, and risk losing what little he had left. His eyes dropped to Atlas. The dog's breathing was steady, calm, but his body ready to move at any second. Always between Caleb and danger. Always choosing him. Caleb swallowed. You already made your choice, didn't you? He said softly. Atlas stepped closer. No hesitation, no doubt. Caleb let out a quiet breath. Yeah, his voice changed. Not heavy, not uncertain, resolved. We don't run. The words settled into place. Final. Atlas's tail flicked once. Caleb turned his attention back to the clearing. They'll tighten the perimeter soon, he said. They'll start sweeping outward. He stood slowly. We move before that. Atlas shifted into position instantly. Caleb took one last look at the cabin and at the life he could have had. Then turned away. No regret. Only purpose. They moved deeper into the forest, circling wide, keeping distance from the clearing. Caleb led now, guiding them along a route that kept elevation and cover in their favor. Minutes passed. Then Atlas froze. A sharp, low growl rumbled from his chest. Caleb stopped immediately. Listened. There, a branch snapping behind them. Caleb's eyes narrowed. They're tracking. He motioned subtly. Atlas moved to the side, slipping into thicker brush. Caleb followed. They waited. Still silent. Seconds stretched. Then a figure appeared through the trees. One of the men moving cautiously, weapon-raised eyes scanning, coming closer. Caleb's breathing slowed again. Measured. The man stepped forward right past them. Didn't see or didn't hear. Caleb waited. The man moved another step, then turned slightly. Atlas reacted first. A sharp bark, Loud, sudden, the man flinched, and in that split second, Caleb moved. He stepped out, grabbing the man's arm, redirecting his movement, forcing him off balance. The weapon dropped from his grip, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The man struggled. Atlas lunged not to harm, but to stop to pin. The man froze instantly, eyes wide. Caleb held him steady. "Listen carefully," Caleb said, voice low and controlled. "You go back. You tell them this land isn't for sale." The man stared at him, breathing hard. "They already know who you are," he said. Caleb didn't react. "They're not stopping." Caleb leaned closer. "Neither am I." A pause. Then Caleb released him, stepped back. Atlas held position for one more second, then pulled away. The man scrambled to his feet, backed away, then ran, disappearing into the trees. Caleb watched him go, not chasing, not needing to. "They'll understand now," he said quietly. Atlas stood beside him. But then, a sudden sharp sound, a crack. Caleb's head snapped to the side. Atlas yelped. A short, sharp cry. Caleb's heart dropped. "Atlas!" The dog staggered slightly, then tried to steady himself, but his front leg gave way. Caleb dropped to his knees beside him. Hey, stay with me. Blood. Not heavy, but enough. A grazing wound along the shoulder. From a distance. From someone else. Caleb's eyes snapped up, scanning the trees. "Shooter," he muttered. His entire body tensed instantly. He pulled Atlas close, then dragging him into cover behind a fallen log. "Easy," he whispered, hands moving quickly, pressing against the wound. Atlas breathed heavily, but didn't fight, didn't panic. Still watching, still guarding. Even now. Caleb's chest tightened. "You're okay," he said. "You're okay." Another shot rang out. Closer. The bark of a tree exploded just inches away. Caleb pulled Atlas lower. "They're done playing," he said. His mind raced. Options. Routes. Time. He looked down at Atlas. The dog met his eyes. Still there, still strong, still with him. Caleb nodded once. "Then we don't play either." He tightened his grip, steadying both of them. The forest around them had changed again. No longer quiet. No longer waiting. Now, it was hunting. And this time, they were the ones being hunted. But Caleb Turner didn't run. Well, not anymore. The forest pressed in around them. Wind moved through the trees, but now it carried something else. Intent, direction, pressure. Caleb crouched low behind the fallen log, one hand steady against Atlas's shoulder, the other bracing himself against the damp earth. Atlas's breathing had slowed, controlled, but the pain was there. Caleb could see it in the tightness of his body, in the way his ears twitched with every distant sound. "You're still with me," Caleb whispered. Atlas lifted his head slightly. "Always." Another distant crack echoed through the trees. Not as close this time. Repositioning, testing. Caleb closed his eyes for just a second. Not to escape. To focus. The noise, the rhythm, the spacing. It all started to come together. Not chaos. Pattern. The old training surfaced. Not in fragments this time, but in clarity. Every movement around him began to make sense. "They're trying to hurt us," he said quietly. Atlas's ears flicked. "Push us into open ground." Caleb's eyes opened again. Sharp, clear. "They think we'll panic." A faint breath left him. "They don't know me." He looked down at Atlas. His voice softer now. "We move slow. Stay low. No sudden breaks." Atlas shifted, testing his weight. A slight limp, but he stood, still strong. Caleb gave a small nod. "That's my boy." He scanned the terrain ahead. There, a narrow slope, thick with brush and rock. Limited visibility. "Perfect. We go that way," he whispered. They moved, careful, deliberate. Each step placed with intention. Atlas stayed close now, not leading, but guarding Caleb's side. A moment of shifting roles, a silent understanding. They moved along the slope, weaving through rocks and low branches. Caleb used the terrain instinctively, keeping them shielded from any clear line of sight. Minutes passed. Then, voices, faint, behind them, their closing distance. Caleb didn't stop, didn't speed up. He adjusted, changed angle slightly, kept moving, his breathing steady, his mind ahead of his body. This wasn't survival anymore. This was control. Atlas suddenly stopped again, but this time, no growl, no warning, just stillness. Caleb followed his gaze. Ahead, a clearing. Small, open, too open. Caleb's jaw tightened. There it is, he murmured. The trap. Exactly where they wanted him. Push him from behind. Force him forward. Expose him. Caleb crouched low, thinking, adjusting, and then he smiled, just slightly. They think I'll walk into it. Atlas looked at him. Caleb shook his head. No. He scanned to the left. A narrow ridge running parallel to the clearing. Higher ground. Limited visibility from below. Perfect angle. We go around, he said. Atlas shifted, ready. They moved left. Slow. Silent. Up the ridge. The incline was steep, but Caleb pushed through using his hands when needed, ignoring the strain in his muscles. Atlas followed, steady despite the injury, not once falling behind. They reached the top. Caleb dropped low immediately. From here he could see them. Two men at the far edge of the clearing, positioned, waiting, weapons ready, eyes scanning, exactly where they expected him to appear. Caleb studied them, not angry, not afraid. Focused. They're good, he admitted quietly. Atlas's ears flicked. But they're predictable. Caleb shifted position slightly, staying hidden behind the ridgeline. His eyes moved across the terrain again, mapping, calculating. There, a second path, behind the two men, uncovered, unwatched. They forgot one thing, Caleb said softly. Atlas looked at him. Caleb's expression hardened. I'm not the man they think I am. He gave Atlas a small signal. Stay. Atlas hesitated. Just for a second. Caleb met his eyes. I'll be right there. Atlas lowered himself slowly, watching, trusting. Caleb moved. Low. Fast. Controlled. He circled wide along the ridge, keeping the terrain between him and the clearing. Every step, silent. Every movement precise. The voices grew louder as he got closer. He's got nowhere to go. He'll break. Caleb stopped just behind them. Close enough to hear every word. Close enough to act. He stepped forward. Quiet. Deliberate. Not today. The words froze them instantly. They turned. Too late. Caleb moved fast, disarming one before he could react, forcing him down, redirecting his momentum. The second man stepped back, reaching, then stopped. Atlas stood behind him, silent, teeth bared, blocking his path. The man froze. Caleb held the first one steady. Tell me something, Caleb said calmly. Neither answered. He nodded slightly. Yeah, thought so. He released them both. Stepped back. Go. They didn't hesitate. They left, fast, disappearing into the trees. Caleb stood still for a moment, breathing steady, not chasing, not needing to. Atlas walked over, slower this time, but still strong, still standing. Caleb crouched beside him. You did good. Atlas leaned slightly into him. Caleb rested his forehead briefly against the dog's. Still saving me. He stood again, looked out across the land, the forest, the mountains, the place they thought would break him. Instead, it had rebuilt him, piece by piece, stronger, clearer, more dangerous than before. They're going to come harder next time, Caleb said. Atlas stood beside him, ready, always ready. Caleb nodded once. Good, he turned, facing deeper into the wilderness, because so am I. And for the first time since the war, Caleb Turner wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. The sky darkened faster than it should have. Storm clouds rolled over the mountains, swallowing the last light of day. The forest shifted with it, wind picking up, branches groaning, leaves whispering against each other like warnings. Caleb stood at the edge of the ridge, watching the valley below. They'll use the dark, he said quietly. Atlas stood beside him, unmoving. They always do. He turned back toward the cabin. No more avoiding it, no more circling. If they want this place, Caleb said, they'll come through it. Atlas's ears lifted. Caleb gave a small nod. Then that's where we meet them. They moved quickly now. No hesitation. No second guessing. The cabin came into view just as the first drops of rain began to fall. Light, cold, then heavier. Within seconds, the forest was alive with the sound of it. Rain hitting leaves, wood, earth, cover, noise, chaos, perfect conditions. Caleb stepped inside the cabin, closing the door behind them. The air inside felt different now. Not empty, not abandoned. Prepared, he moved with purpose. Checking windows, reinforcing the weak points. Positioning himself where he could see without being seen. Atlas stayed near the center of the room, watching every angle. Waiting. Minutes passed. The rain intensified. Then, a sound. Faint. Outside. Caleb's head tilted slightly. Listening. There. Footsteps. Careful. Measured. More than before. He exhaled slowly. They brought more. Atlas's body stiffened. Caleb moved toward the window, peering through a narrow gap in the wood. Shapes, moving between the trees. At least 6 spreading out, coordinated. A full sweep. Caleb's jaw tightened. They're done scouting. A flash of distant lightning lit the room once, then faded. Atlas let out a low growl. Caleb stepped back from the window. They'll try to flush us out. He moved quickly to the floor, pulling up the loose board again. The box still there, still waiting. He grabbed the contents, money, key, and most importantly, the drives, and packed them securely. If this place went, the truth couldn't. Atlas shifted closer. Caleb placed a hand briefly on his neck. Stay close. A loud thud hit the side of the cabin. Wood creaked. Then, a voice from outside. Caleb Turner. Caleb froze. Not from fear, from recognition. That voice, calm, controlled, too familiar. Step outside, the voice continued. We can resolve this. Caleb's expression darkened. Howard Pike, the lawyer. Atlas's growl deepened. Caleb straightened slowly. They sent him. The rain pounded harder now, drumming against the roof, masking smaller sounds. Caleb moved toward the door, stopped, listened. Another step outside, then another. They were closing in. Caleb, Pike called again. You don't understand what you're holding. Caleb's grip tightened slightly. I understand enough, Caleb said under his breath. Atlas moved to his side. Ready. Caleb opened the door, just enough to step out. Rain soaked him instantly. Cold, sharp, real. Pike stood about 20 feet away, umbrella overhead, clean, untouched by the mud, the chaos. Men behind him, armed, silent, watching. Mr. Turner, Pike said calmly, you've caused quite a situation. Caleb didn't move. Funny, he replied. I was thinking the same about you. Pike smiled faintly. This doesn't need to escalate. It already has. A pause. Rain filled the silence between them. Pike studied him carefully. You were never meant to find that bunker, he said. Caleb's eyes didn't leave him. And Marcus? Pike's expression shifted slightly. Barely noticeable. He made poor choices. Caleb's jaw tightened. He tried to tell the truth. Pike shook his head. He tried to disrupt something far larger than himself. Caleb stepped forward slightly. And now I am. The men behind Pike shifted, tension rising. Atlas stepped forward with him. Even through the rain, his presence was undeniable, protective, unyielding. Pike's eyes flicked briefly to the dog, then back to Caleb. You're not in a position to fight this, Pike said, calmly. Caleb's voice dropped. I've been fighting it longer than you think. A long pause. The rain slowed slightly, but just enough for the silence to grow heavier. Then, a sudden movement. One of Pike's men stepped forward too fast. Atlas reacted instantly. A blur of motion, a sharp bark. Then impact. The man stumbled back, losing footing in the mud. The others raised their weapons. Caleb stepped forward. Stop, The word cut through everything. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Pike raised a hand. The men froze. For a moment, everything held, balanced on a knife's edge. Caleb stood there, soaked, steady, unshaken. Atlas beside him, bleeding slightly, but unbroken. Pike studied him again, longer this time. Then he nodded. "Very well," he said quietly. He turned slightly. "We're done here. For now." The men hesitated, then followed. One by one, they disappeared back into the trees, leaving Caleb and Atlas alone in the storm. Caleb didn't move, didn't relax. Not yet. He watched until the last shadow was gone. Then he exhaled slowly. "They're regrouping," he said. Atlas stood beside him, still alert, still ready. Caleb looked down at him, at the wound, at the blood mixing with rain. His chest had tightened. "You're still here," he whispered. Atlas leaned slightly against him. "As always." Caleb nodded, then looked out into the dark forest again. "They think this ends with fear," he said. A faint, hard smile formed. "It ends with truth." The storm rolled on. The forest waited. And somewhere out there the next move had already begun. But this time Caleb Turner wasn't reacting. He was ready. And he wasn't alone. The storm passed sometime before dawn. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat inside the cabin, his back against the wall, eyes fixed on the door, while the last of the rain tapped against the roof. Atlas lay beside him, breathing steady but slower now, his injured shoulder wrapped with strips torn from Caleb's shirt. Every now and then Caleb reached down just to feel him there, still alive, still fighting. "Stay with me," he murmured once. Atlas's tail moved slightly against the wooden floor. That was enough. When the first light broke through the trees, it came soft and gray. The kind of morning that didn't promise anything, but didn't take anything away either. Caleb stood slowly. His body ached, but his mind clear, focused, final. "It's time," he said quietly. Atlas lifted his head. Caleb moved to the table, pulling out the drives again. He held them in his hand for a moment, feeling their weight, not just evidence. A weapon. He looked at Atlas. "We don't fight them out here," he said. Atlas blinked slowly. "We finish it where they can't hide." Caleb grabbed his pack, securing everything inside. Then he took one last look around the cabin, the place that had almost broken him. Now it had rebuilt him. "Let's go," he said. They moved out at first light. No hesitation. No looking back. The truck was still where he had left it, hidden behind a line of trees further down the slope. It took them nearly an hour to reach it, moving carefully, watching for any sign of Redstone's men. Nothing. Too quiet. They pulled back, Caleb said. Atlas jumped into the passenger seat, with a low grunt, settling carefully to avoid pressure on his shoulder. Caleb started the engine. The sound cut through the silence, real, grounding. He gripped the wheel, then drove. The dirt road stretched ahead, winding through the mountains, leading away from everything that had happened, and straight toward what needed to happen next. Hours passed. The forest gave way to open land, then to long stretches of highway. Caleb didn't speak, didn't need to. Every mile brought him closer to something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Atlas rested his head against the seat, eyes half closed, but still alert, still watching. Caleb glanced at him briefly. "We're almost there." The town appeared just before noon. Small, quiet, unremarkable, exactly what he needed. Caleb parked near the edge of the street, engine idling for a moment before he shut it off. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. But it took him a second to remember how to use it for something like this. Not calls, not family, something else. He scrolled, found the number, a name Marcus had mentioned in the material he left behind. A journalist, someone who had been digging into things but never had proof. Until now. Caleb stared at the screen, then pressed call. It rang. Once, twice, then hello? A woman's voice. Sharp, alert. "This is Danielle Harper." Caleb's voice was steady. "I have something you've been looking for." A pause. Then, "Who is this?" Caleb looked ahead, out the windshield, at the quiet town that had no idea what was about to change. "My name is Caleb Turner," he said. Another pause. "Longer this time. I know that name," she said slowly. "Yeah," Caleb replied. "You should." Silence. Then she asked, "What do you have?" Caleb's grip tightened slightly on the phone. "The truth." No hesitation, no doubt. Another pause. Then, "Where are you?" Caleb gave her the location. She didn't respond right away. Then, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Caleb lowered the phone. Atlas lifted his head slightly. "It's happening," Caleb said quietly. Atlas's tail moved once. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up across the street. A woman in her mid-40s stepped out, sharp-eyed and focused. She walked straight toward him with no hesitation. Caleb stepped out of the truck, and they met halfway. She studied him, glanced at Atlas, then looked back at Caleb. "You look like someone who's been through hell." Caleb gave a faint nod. "Still am." She didn't smile. "Then show me." Caleb reached into his pack and pulled out the drives. He held them out. She hesitated for only a second before taking them carefully, as if she already understood their weight. "What's on these?" she asked. Caleb's voice didn't change. "Everything." She looked at him more closely this time. "And you're just handing this over?" Caleb glanced down at Atlas, then back at her. "I'm not running anymore." Danielle Harper nodded slowly. She turned toward her car, then stopped before opening the door. "They're going to come after you," she said. "I know." A pause. Then Danielle gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Good." She drove away. Caleb watched her car disappear, but the moment it was gone, his attention returned to Atlas. The dog had been carrying the shoulder wound for too long. Whatever happened next could wait an hour. He found a veterinary clinic on the far side of town. The wound was a graze, painful, dirty, but not life-threatening. The veterinarian cleaned it, closed what needed closing, and sent Atlas away with antibiotics, pain medication, and strict instructions to rest. Atlas seemed personally offended by the last part. For the first time in days, Caleb almost laughed. They spent the next 2 nights in a cheap roadside motel while Danielle verified the files and made copies in more than one place. Caleb slept in fragments, waking whenever a car slowed outside. Atlas slept beside the bed, bandaged shoulder rising and falling with each steady breath. On the 3rd morning, Caleb's phone buzzed. A news alert filled the screen. Redstone Dominion was under federal investigation. Search warrants had been executed in multiple states. Several executives and contractors had been detained for questioning. Howard Pike's name appeared farther down the article among those under scrutiny. Caleb read the alert twice before lowering the phone. "They didn't have time to bury it again," he murmured. Atlas stepped closer. Caleb knelt beside him and rested a hand gently against his neck. "It's not all over. Maybe it never is, but the truth is out." Atlas looked at him, not questioning, just present. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah." He stood and looked through the motel window at the ordinary street beyond. Cars passed. People carried coffee. A delivery truck stopped at the corner. Life continued without knowing how close a hidden machine had come to swallowing another piece of the truth. "They tried to bury it," Caleb said. Atlas stood beside him. Caleb's voice lowered. "But truth doesn't stay buried forever." Peace did not arrive like a victory. It came in smaller pieces. A dog breathing steadily beside him. A phone that had finally stopped ringing with threats. A morning in which every passing engine did not become a helicopter in his mind. The memories were still there. They probably always would be. But for the first time in years, Caleb did not feel as though he were standing outside his own life. He crouched beside Atlas and rested a hand against the side of the dog's neck. "Well, you did it," he said quietly. Atlas blinked. Caleb smiled faintly. "No, we did it." A breeze moved through the open window carrying dust and the faint smell of distant rain. Caleb stood slowly and picked up his pack. "Let's go home." The drive back felt different. The same road, the same mountains, but nothing felt heavy anymore. Not like before. The memories were still there. The flashes, the sounds, but they didn't own him now. They didn't control him. He drove with one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching over to Atlas, just to remind himself he wasn't alone. Hours passed. The mountains rose again around them, familiar now, not hostile, not empty, just land. Waiting. The cabin came into view as the sun dipped low behind the trees. Golden light spread across the clearing, touching the broken wood, the worn roof, the scars left behind by everything that had happened. Caleb parked the truck, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, just listening. No voices, no footsteps, no threat, only wind, only quiet. Atlas stepped out first, slower this time, but steady. Caleb followed. The air felt different here now. Not like a place he had been sent to, a place he had been forced into. This was something else. A place he had chosen. He walked to the cabin door, pushed it open. Inside everything was as they had left it, simple, worn, but still standing. Caleb stepped in, set his pack down, then looked around. "This will do," he said softly. Atlas moved to the center of the room and lay down, letting out a long breath. Tired, but safe. Caleb grabbed a chair and set it near the window, sat down, and watched the light fade outside. Time passed. No rush, no urgency, just space to breathe, to think, to exist. Later, he stepped outside again. The sky had turned deep blue, stars beginning to show. He looked toward the spot behind the cabin, where the bunker was hidden, still there, still holding everything Marcus had built, everything that had almost been lost. Caleb walked a few steps in that direction, then stopped, not going down, not tonight. Some things didn't need to be opened again. Not right away. He turned back toward the cabin. Atlas was watching him from the doorway, waiting, always waiting. Caleb smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said, "I'm coming." He stepped back inside, closed the door behind him. The cabin creaked softly as the temperature dropped, wood settling, holding, and Caleb moved to the corner, pulling out a blanket, laying it down near Atlas. Then he sat beside him, close, quiet. After a while, he spoke. "Marcus gave me more than land." Atlas shifted slightly. Caleb's voice softened. "He gave me a second chance, a long pause, the kind that didn't need to be filled." Caleb leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed. The past was still there, always would be, but it wasn't a weight anymore. It was something else, something he could carry, something he could understand. Atlas let out a slow breath. Caleb reached over, resting his hand gently on him. "Get some rest," he whispered. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, gentle now, no longer warning, no longer watching, just passing through. And inside the small cabin on the mountain, a man who had once been broken sat beside the only companion who had never left him. No war, no running, no fear. Just stillness, just time, and the quiet understanding that what he had been given wasn't just survival. It was meaning, it was truth. It was a life he had fought to reclaim. Caleb Turner closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he slept. If this story touched you even just a little, I want you to do something simple. Type 1 in the comments if you believe loyalty like Atlas still exists in this world. Or type 0 if you think people like Caleb are forgotten too easily. And if you've ever been through something hard, something no one else could see, just type "still here." I read every single comment. And don't forget to subscribe and stay with us, because the next story might feel even closer to home. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.